The game every day with sheer emotion, and those who see it more as an intellectual exercise. For those of you who don't know me, I tend to arc off on occasion, and I'm often in low Earth orbit. That Marine cued me to better understand myself and others. But that's my DNA, and it's worked out okay, I guess, but only because I've had people at my side like Susan Hodges. She is often at the controls for my re-entry from that orbit. Her value to me personally and the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation is frankly beyond words. I am grateful, the staff and directors are grateful, and every supporter of our mission is grateful for Susan Hodges' commitment, loyalty, judgment, and wisdom. We would not be here today with groundbreaking having taken place a few weeks ago and on the verge of completing this magnificent museum. We would not be here at this moment in the Foundation's history and the museum's future without her. Thank you, Susan, and once again, congratulations. It is now my distinct honor to announce our Lieutenant General John A. Luzerne recognition for exemplary leadership. In order to recognize demonstrated leadership in one's chosen profession, appointed or elected position that is clearly exemplary and worthy of emulation, the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation established the John A. Luzerne Recognition for Exemplary Leadership. Recognition is made in the form of a statuette of General Luzerne provided by founder and board member Patrick Brent. The recipient must epitomize the core values of honor, courage, and commitment, and practice the leadership traits and principles ascribed to by General Luzerne and the United States Marine Corps. Our 2015 Luzerne recognition goes to the Honorable George P. Shultz. Secretary Shultz is a distinguished fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, but throughout this very distinguished career, he has held a number of extraordinary positions. He was the 60th United States Secretary of State, where he played a key role in implementing a foreign policy that led to the successful conclusion of the Cold War. He was the 62nd United States Secretary of the Treasury. During this time, he also served as chairman of the Council on Economic Policy, negotiated a series of trade protocols with the Soviet Union, and represented the United States at the Tokyo meeting on the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. He was the 11th United States Secretary of Labor and the first United States Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Secretary Shultz is one of two individuals in history who have held 4 different federal cabinet posts. He has taught at 3 of this country's most prestigious universities, and for 8 years he was president of a major engineering and construction company. And this extraordinary career all began with Captain George Shultz, United States Marine Corps, serving in the Pacific during World War II from 1942 to 1945. Ladies and gentlemen, we named Secretary Shultz the recipient of the John A. Luzerne Recognition for Exemplary Leadership a few months back. And I spoke to him on the phone, and unfortunately, due to the distance that would be required for him to travel, he could not be here this evening. But he asked if he could record a message to share with all of you, all of us, on this special evening. So please direct your attention to the screens.
I'm truly honored to receive this award in the name of Lieutenant General John Luzerne. An award from a Marine Corps of leadership is really something, because there's no outfit in the world from which you learn about leadership except by service in the Marine Corps. Let me give you a couple examples from my own experience. It all starts in boot camp. I remember the day the sergeant handed me my rifle. He says, "Take good care of this rifle. This is your best friend. And remember one thing, never point this rifle at anybody unless you're willing to pull the trigger. No empty threats." That's a message that is not only on the battlefield, but in diplomacy. And it has broader implications. It says to you, do what you say you're going to do, mean what you say. If you do that, then you're good for your word. People know how to deal with you. You can be trusted. So when you're dealing, say, with members of Congress or Secretary of State, if your reputation is that you do what you say, then you can deal. So in that sense, it's an instiller of trust, and trust is the coin of the realm. Then I remember we had some action going on, and there was a wonderful sergeant in my outfit named Patton, and I relied on him. He was a friend. And I was looking around for him, and I ran over where I thought he might be. I said, "Where the hell's Patton?" "Patton's dead, sir." I'll never forget that moment, because the reality of war sinks in. Wonderful people get killed, wounded, displaced in one way or another. So if you're ever in a position, as I was as Secretary of State, to be part of decisions to send our young men, our Marines, into battle, remember Patton. Be careful. Be sure you have a good mission. Be sure you're set up to win, properly equipped, properly thought through, because wonderful people get killed in war. Don't forget it. Now, the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation and the museum are wonderful places. Not only they tell you the story of this and that war and victory and so on, but they're teaching you things about leadership, about history. There's a wonderful panel in the museum that has Marine Corps events on one level and events in the world in general on the other. And it's just a history lesson in what happens in the interaction between strength and diplomacy and events. So I feel very proud, of course, to be a Marine, and I salute the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation and the museum for all that they do. Once again, thank you for this tremendous honor.
Since Secretary Shultz was unable to travel here, he asked his good friend and colleague, General Jim Mattis, an Annenberg Distinguished Visiting Fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, to accept on his behalf. General Mattis has commanded at multiple levels in his 42-year career as a Marine, most recently as commander of the U.S. Central Command from 2010 to 2013. He was responsible for military operations involving more than 200,000 United States soldiers, sailors, airmen, Coast Guardsmen, and Marines in Afghanistan, Iraq, and 18 other countries in the Middle East and South Central Asia. I know he needs no further introduction to any of you here this evening. General Mattis, if you would do us the honor of receiving the Luzerne Award for Secretary Shultz and share a few words.
Thanks, Rusty, old friend. To be here with you tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is obviously a humbling honor to accept this award on behalf of Secretary Shultz and to be here with the Commandant and his lady. And I can't be here either with the number of Vietnam veterans in the audience without acknowledging two of them who, for my generation of Marines, they raised us, really. And I would just say to General Sheehan and General Boomer, you were, throughout my career, you were stalwart leaders. You taught us tactical cunning. And I would just tell you that to the Vietnam generation that raised us, we were ready when it was our turn to stand and deliver. We were never worried about the enemy. We were only concerned with whether or not we would let you down. So here in front of an audience that today is welcomed home with its young troops in America, unlike when you came home, I'd just like to say how much this Corps owes the Vietnam generation. Thanks, sir. I haven't really thanked General Boomer either for the opportunity 25 years ago when he sent me into 2 minefields. I'm not sure if I should thank him for those 2. But I would also just mention that a dear friend of mine of many years, the CEO of General Dynamics, Ms. Phoebe Novakovic, is here. And it's hard to believe, many years ago now, Phoebe, when we served together, I learned that not all patriotism is found in people wearing uniforms. Thank you for what you did in those years gone by and what you continue to do. And I would just say to the Gold Star families here and young Kate, we'll never forget, Robert, you represent all of them to us in our hearts. And Jake, you lost a leg fighting for your country in Afghanistan, but you got a long-legged American beauty out of the deal, so well done, young man. You got to look at the bright side. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for allowing me to represent Secretary Shultz. I won't belabor just how humbling that is when you know who he is. We all know him. But accepting a leadership award on behalf of him, a Marine from our nation's greatest generation who fought the way across the Pacific in that bloody campaign, who is a close friend at Hoover on the Stanford campus. We call him the senior Marine on campus, even though I'm a 4-star. You understand the order of march there. But it's a leader, whose name alone is his passport, a passport to the trust of the American people and world leaders all around the globe. He's a patriot whose mature competence that you just saw demonstrated there and breathtaking agility mark him as a man for all seasons, and he truly is. He takes, I would tell you, a degree of intellectual honesty to a new level, a higher level, and it's something that is very rare today in the Western democracies. Secretary Shultz may not physically be with us, but I assure you, he wanted you to know that he is here in spirit tonight. And I would tell you, too, that even 70 years since he left active duty, he does not conduct one class at Stanford without some reference to the Marine Corps, and no night is complete in his home until he says, as they say in the Marine Corps, it's time to stack arms and get the hell out of here. And that's the way he does it. I'm privileged, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, to carry one of his coins. And I would just tell you that he makes the point about being a Marine without any shyness. It says on one side, George P. Shultz, United States Marine Corps, and there's the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. And on the other side, as one of only 2 Americans in our history to serve in 4 cabinet-level posts, are 4 tiny emblems for those posts. One emblem on one side, 4 miniatures on the other. You know where his heart lies. I think Einstein said it well when Einstein said, adversity introduces a man to himself, and George's character was not found wanting when, after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, he had to go to war. His 2.5 years in the Pacific revealed much of the man known today as the senior man on campus, senior Marine on campus. because when he returned home, as you heard in the video, he knew that war was not a theoretical issue. It was not something you dabbled in and dealt with lightly. Instead, he knew it was gravely important, a point he demonstrated time after time in numerous different posts. And from his first days in our Corps, he carried the Corps' steadfast values into every one of his leadership positions. Beginning with what he learned from that sergeant who handed him his first rifle and said, when you give your word, you live up to it, to the loss of friends that stick with him to this day. His voice still breaks when he talks about his sergeant. He understands the human cost of war, something that we all understand in this room. His life contradicts the Marxist view that we're all just chips carried along by life's larger currents. Rather, at 94 years young and still at the top of his game, he stands as proof that one man or woman of integrity is always in the majority. I would just tell you, too, that the words of one of our nation's most formidable diplomatic leaders outlines George Shultz as a man. Mr. Paul Nitze, writing of our award recipient's last day in office after leading the State Department for 6.5 years, in a final surprise meeting that day, his own staff gave him a medallion with the first Secretary of State's picture on it, and that, of course, was Thomas Jefferson. They then read some witty letters from Secretary Shultz's friends, Prime Minister Thatcher, and listen who these friends are: Prime Minister Thatcher, Chairman Gorbachev, Chancellor Kohl. Think about that, being able to pull that many different people together in admiration and respect. Then Mr. Nitze spoke, and you will recognize Marine leadership through a non-Marine's eyes as you listen to an erudite observer of a Marine named George. Paul Nitze said, "Mr. Secretary, for us old-timers in the government, these years serving in your State Department have been unique. Within a week after you took over, it was evident that the Shultz regime would be different. The aim would be team play, not bureaucratic infighting. What would count was initiative, energy, and courage. We were confident that you would back us up if we ran into personal opposition for pursuing forward-reaching ideas. Over the years, your thoughts, ideas, and integrity prevailed," Mr. Nitze said. And he further went on to say, "The results are there for everyone to see. They cover every aspect of world affairs. The centerpiece has been Western relationships with the Soviet Union. 6 years ago, the relationships were wholly adversarial. Gradually, you managed to expand the scope and the depth of the dialogue. By persistence, you raised human rights from a taboo subject to the forefront of our dialogue. On arms control, from concrete achievement on INF to other efforts, you opened wide the scope for achievable success." And that success, of course, was the greatest reduction in nuclear weapons in history. Mr. Nitze closed by asking, what are the elements of character and leadership that have made all that possible? And he went on to answer his own question. Mr. Nitze said, "I would list them as follows: being wholly comfortable within your own skin, a common sense approach to problems, forthrightness in your relations with others, confidence in the United States, and the fundamental ideas informing our country's spirit." Ladies and gentlemen, you can understand why I'm humbled to be asked by General Blackman and your board to accept this award here in this room tonight among all of you. In the Marine Corps, our heritage remains a bulwark of our combat capability, a heritage bequeathed to us by Marines like George. Every Marine climbing into a helo for an assault or laying along the line of departure as the minutes tick down, shivering from more than the night's chill air, every Marine fresh from recruit training going into his first brawl, they all know that nothing we face can be worse than the Pacific War. And today, when George Shultz describes a world being awash in change, in a time when the American government is in disheartening disarray, even while dangers mount, our Marine Heritage Foundation provides a firm foundation from which our soldiers of the sea can confidently address the challenges we all see coming from merciless enemies intent on destroying our experiment in democracy. That includes those who thought by hurting us that they could scare us, and we've shown them we don't scare. Tonight, the Heritage Foundation once again brings into sharp focus the Marine Corps' value to the nation, and with this award recognizing Secretary Shultz and his example of personal integrity and wide-ranging competence. Celebrating a history of excellence, the Heritage Foundation, under General Blackman's able leadership, keeps alive the inspiration we'll need, even as General Dunford steers the Corps forward, using the past as prologue. And on behalf of the Marine George Shultz, I humbly accept the award for him. There is no one finer to be acknowledged by your noble gesture. Thank you, and Semper Fidelis.
General Mattis, thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening and making it even a more special night for our awardees and guests. Thank you. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your dessert and coffee. And once again, I'll be back. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to introduce our military guest of honor, the 36th Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Joe Dunford.
Thanks. Thank you. Hey, thanks, General Blackman, for that introduction. You know, I've been fortunate enough to have General Blackman as a good friend and a mentor for over 35 years. But we actually, and I was just reminded of a minute ago, we actually got off to a pretty rocky start in February 1978. I checked into the 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines as a second lieutenant. I was in my Service A uniform, and I walked into the adjutant's office and I did what I was instructed to do, which is to report. Lieutenant Dunford reporting as ordered. And in the adjutant's chair was a fairly surly-looking captain with his feet up on the desk, who I later found out was the commanding officer of Company L. And he said, and he must have picked up a little bit of the accent, and he said, "Where are you from, Lieutenant?" I said, "Sir, I'm from Boston." And he said, "And you're a Red Sox fan?" with even more disdain, perhaps, than when he asked me where I was from. I said, "Yes, sir, I am." And for the next, what seemed like hours, he berated me until I was rescued by having to report to the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Hoare at the time, fortunately not a Yankees fan. And, you know, later on I found out that we actually have a word for what you did to me, General Blackman. Today we call it hazing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight and for your support of the foundation. I'd particularly like to thank General Boomer, General Blackman, Susan Hodges, and the rest of the team for all they've done to preserve and advance our history and to continue to develop a museum that every Marine can be proud of. I'd also like to once again thank the awardees who have made a truly significant contribution in telling the story of who we are and what we do. And finally, I want to thank Angie Morgan and the folks on the award committee. You have to know, Angie has been a friend and an advisor to me in the past, and about a week and a half ago, she sent me an email saying, "Could you please, in your remarks, say that this event, of all the Marine Corps events that you attend, this event is absolutely the best?" And so I said, well, I sent her an email back saying, "Angie, I'll do that if you want, but I'm going to have to tell people that you told me to say that." And she said, "Well, that'd be okay, because if I can prove to my husband that you'll listen to me, it may actually have a positive effect on him." So, Matt Morgan, where are you? Yeah, over to you. Oh, General Blackman asked me to provide a quick update on the Marine Corps, and I do that mindful of the fact that I am last in the program. And consistent with the tradition that General Blackman started in 1978, he's looking out for me in his own special way. But since we are here tonight at the museum to recognize contributions